But hello and welcome to our second Tux Sanders Series Invited Lecture of 2020. So today it is my distinct pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Justine Cassell. Dr. Cassell is currently on leave from Carnegie Mellon University to hold the founding international chair at the PRAIRIE Institute on Interdisciplinary Research in AI in Paris. And for those of you who don't know, this is one of the French President Macron's 4 new AI institutes in France. But prior to going on leave, Dr. Cassell was Associate Dean of Technology, Strategy, and Impact in the School of Computer Science at CMU, co-director of the Simon Initiative on Technology-Enhanced Learning, co-director of the Yahoo InMind Project on the Future of Personal Assistance, and also director of the Articulab at CMU. She's also Director Emerita of the HCI Institute, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with at Carnegie Mellon. And before arriving at CMU, she was a faculty member at Northwestern University, where she was the founding director of both the Center for Technology and Social Behavior and the corresponding PhD program on Technology and Social Behavior, which was a joint PhD in Communication and Computer Science. Prior to that, Dr. Cassell was a tenured professor at the MIT Media Lab, where she directed the Gesture and Narrative Language Research Group. Dr. Cassell holds a DUG, which is a French sort of undergraduate degree in literature from the University of Besançon in France, an MLit in linguistics from the University of Edinburgh, and a dual PhD in psychology and linguistics from the University of Chicago. So she's been long interested in human-human conversation and storytelling. And early in her career, she became interested in how computational systems can participate in these activities. And this led her to really deconstruct the linguistic elements of conversation and storytelling to create virtual agents that embody conversational, social, and narrative intelligence. And this is to let people interact with these human agents in human-like ways. And indeed, she's actually credited with developing the Embodied Conversation Agent, or ECA, which is a virtual human that is capable of interacting with humans using both language and nonverbal behavior, like gestures. Importantly, though, her research also addresses the impact and benefits that such technologies have on learning and communication. And her work has really been pioneering and inspiring in that respect. And this is reflected both in her really impressive publication record, but also in the numerous awards and honors that she's received. So to name just a few, Dr. Cassell won the Edgerton Prize at MIT in 2001, the Anita Borg Institute Women of Vision Award for Leadership, and the National Academy of Sciences Henry and Bryna David Prize. She was also named to the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council on Robotics and Smart Devices. She actually subsequently chaired this council as well. And she's been named a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and an ACM Fellow. So personally, I've actually known Justine since I was a graduate student at the MIT Media Lab, and I've been familiar with her work and impressed by it for even longer, basically ever since I saw her research on an embodied virtual real estate agent named Ria, which was presented, I think it was at Chi 99 in Pittsburgh. I could go on for a while here, but just to make sure that we actually leave enough time for Justine to talk, I only want to add that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Justine's effort to use technology to empower and give voice to those who are often underrepresented within the technological landscape, such as children in developing countries, women in science, and young girls. And so from this perspective as well, Justine's work has really been an inspiration to many, particularly young and not so young like me, women in computing-related fields. And I can also add that Justine is actually an excellent cook. So aside from doing all these wonderful things in the computing field, she also does things like judges in winemaking competitions. So this weekend, actually, she will be judging for the independent winemakers of France. So she's truly a very interdisciplinary individual. So with that said, please join me in welcoming to the stage today's Tux Sanders Series distinguished speaker, Dr. Justine Cassell.
Thanks. People keep asking me why I'm not spending longer in Toronto, and it's because the judging for the Independent Vigneron de France starts on Friday, and there is no way I'm missing that. So I was going to start this with history, but I think I am actually going to talk through a little bit of history, because since I arrived in France and I've been part of this AI Institute, I've been thinking a lot about the history of AI and how its history has led us to where we are today. And I think that there's a really important lesson for HCI, more generally for computer science in that. So we all know this story. Any of us who are interested in the slightest in history know this story. The term artificial intelligence came out of a series of of workshops that were held at Dartmouth College in 1956. The funding was obtained by John McCarthy and Marvin Minsky. They wrote to the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller Foundation said, this all sounds really weird. We're not sure we want to support it. It's probably unlikely, and you're probably not going to be able to do this. We'll give you a little bit of money. And so they gave them a little bit of money, which actually meant that the 18 people that they invited had to take turns being at the workshop. So various people were there at various parts during the summer. So they invented this term, artificial intelligence, and they defined it as machines that could learn as humans did and emulate any behavior that humans did. Right? We all kind of take this for granted, but I just was a little uncomfortable with this because the more I work on interactive systems, the more I'm struck by the fact that interactive doesn't seem to be a given in a lot of AI. They emulate people, but that doesn't mean that they were built to interact with people. And we see the impact of this all around us. Any of you who have any family members over the age of like 29 are asking you whether you're replacing people with robots and whether the world is going to stop and whether our jobs are going to end and whether we're all going to turn into automata ourselves. And so I started looking at the history of where this idea of emulating everything humans do came from. And it turns out that there's an alternate origin story that we don't hear about that's actually prior to the 56 Dartmouth summer workshops. And that, in fact, I think is the real origin of the work that we do when we build interactive systems. And that started in 48. Actually, it started in 43 with a paper written by one of the first neuroscientists, 1943, on neural networks, and which I didn't know until recently when I read this, this paper. And he joined together, this neuroscientist joined together with Norbert Wiener, who is the founder of the alternative to AI called cybernetics. And Norbert Wiener had a very different vision of what computers were capable of doing. His notion was that we should be able to build computers that interact with people in a constant feedback loop, and that they should take into account our psychology, our physicality, our spirit, and every other aspect of what it means to be human. And in order to explore this, he wrote to the Macy Foundation, who did believe him, and were a lot more generous with their funding, for a series of conferences that took place between 48 and 56. And both of these things, by the way, had to do with the fact that the war had finished and people were scared about what machines could be capable of. So the Macy lectures were co-run by Norbert Wiener and Margaret Mead, probably the most famous anthropologist who's ever lived. And the fact that Margaret Mead was a part of this meant that humans and human behavior and human culture was fully at the center of the design of new computers. So in that origin story, which started 12 years before the Dartmouth summer workshops, the goal was to understand how machines could interact with people in a way that would be profitable to humans. Not cool? I mean, it's not the story that we hear. And the reason it's not the story we hear is because this was academia and politics. And so it turns out that John McCarthy and Marvin Minsky hated Norbert Wiener because he was getting more press than they were. And so they decided they'd invent another term, and they'd advertise their term, artificial intelligence, as being newer and better than cybernetics. Can you believe that? That is why we have the origin story we have. I mean, I'm shortening the story here a bit, but this is kind of basic, the idea. So if you go back to the Macy lectures, you can read about feedback loops between humans and machines, feedback loops that we currently would call adaptivity and personalization. So the systems that I'm going to talk about are really outcomes of that Macy lecture origin story. But I'm going to start by a very contemporary approach to machines that interact with humans. Contemporary, but that I believe is a throwback to the wrong definition of AI. And that's conversational commerce. How many of you have heard the term conversational commerce? It's really actually effective. So sometimes I have trouble with Air France, and I found that if I contact them on Facebook using Facebook Messenger, they're there 24 hours a day, and they're a lot more responsive. And it turns out they have a lot more power than real humans, in fact, in their offices. So you can get a lot of stuff done if you contact them on Messenger. And in conversational commerce, which is systems that are there to respond to people, that are there to sell to people, that are advertised as being able to convert every customer. What that means is get them to buy. Convert every customer online and in-store. Elevate the customer experience, not for its own reason, but to sell more in-store, online, and beyond. Provides up to 4 times more sales conversions, once again, sales, than traditional buying channels, and designed to cater to our most natural human tendency, which you will not be surprised to hear is to connect, to converse, but most importantly, to invest in products and services after acquiring the proper confidence and context to do so. So that's what conversational commerce is. What was interesting to me was the photo that came along with this. What do you notice about this photo? Yeah. This is going to be interactive, by the way.
The dialogue seems to only be going one direction.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So when I think of conversation, I tend to think of something that's two-way. But here what you have is basically an agent saying buy, 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 convert from being a customer to being a product owner. So no wonder conversational commerce is not fulfilling those ambitious goals that it's been said to fulfill, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So one of the things that's often talked about in terms of making effective conversational commerce, conversational agents, is empathy. So XAI, for example, has said they've built a personality into Andrew and Amy, composed of 4 traits: politeness, professionalism, friendliness, clarity, and then empathy. And they say, to make Amy and Andrew as human as possible, we also worked hard to identify places in their dialogue where we might need to apply empathy. That's like applying a Band-Aid. For instance, when Andrew is delivering bad news, such as declining a time or having to cancel a meeting, he needs to soften his tone. If Andrew has to deliver the same bad news more than once, unfortunately, Dennis is not available at that time. We need to inject even more empathy. Depending on how many times we've declined a time, Andrew will, we add slightly different language. If we're declining a time for the 2nd time, Andrew will say, "I'm sorry," at the beginning of the message. And if we're declining for a 3rd time, he begins with, "I'm so sorry." Now, what's interesting to me is if we bring this together with that image that we saw, Andrew's doing a lot of talking, but we don't see Andrew doing a lot of listening. And let's look at how this actually gets interpreted in agents. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on, to be given a large database of call center dialogues. These are text dialogues because increasingly what are called call centers are no longer calls, but messages. And the thing about call centers these days is in order to make a profit, they use messaging rather than language because you can message with up to 15 customers at a time. And this is why it takes so long. If you've ever tried to message with a company, this is why it takes so long for them to get back to you, because they're actually going around in a circle. And as a way of keeping track of where they are, they have a screen that gives them cut and paste phrases that they can cut and paste into the message with you. So let's look at some of these. And these are not computer human. These are human, but they're human, I think they would call them augmented by computers. So this is something that we know about customer satisfaction. It's something we know about conversation in the first place. So for a travel agent, the customer says, I mean, it's amazing to be able to go to Bora Bora. And the agent says, wow, it sounds really like a bucket list item. And the customer says, totally, thanks for making it possible. And the agent says, oh, I'm thrilled for you. Now, this is a pretty good interaction. In fact, I would probably rate this 90 out of 100 because, well, let's simply see why by comparing it to another interaction, likewise in the travel domain. Customer says, I'd like to purchase the ticket today. Agent says, no problem. In fact, I can get the ticket purchased for you and you can print it at home, which will save you the trouble of waiting for it to arrive and will reassure you. Customer has hung up. Agent says, hello? Now, what's the issue here? This person has seen that image of empathy in conversational commerce. It's one way. And so the agent is talking at the customer, and the customer has other things to do. So while mutuality predicts customer satisfaction, that is, you should match the level of your language to your customer's language. You should be enthusiastic if your customer is enthusiastic. You should indicate that you're listening. You should not spend your time mouthing off about how fabulous a job you're doing. So let's look at this again. Another strategy that we know, and I'm going to show you in a little while how I know these strategies. I'm going to show you some human-human interaction where we learn these strategies from. We know that evoking self-disclosure is a strategy that increases satisfaction on the part of customers. In fact, it increases a sense of closeness. So if I say, Allie, tell me more about your job at Ryerson, her level of affect towards me will rise. So here's a customer who calls and says, I mean, this is the 5th time I've called, and I'm not getting any satisfaction. Okay, the right answer, which is not what the agent did, would have been, can you tell me more? But what this agent actually said was, I know exactly how you feel. The same thing happened to me. Now, why is this a problem? It's empathetic, right? It's not solution-oriented. Yeah. What else? Is the agent trying to say that this company sucks so bad that the same exact thing happened to the agent with this company? That's not really the right message to give. And then it's TMI. It's too much information. It's oversharing. The customer is not there to know how bad a life the agent has. So evoking self-disclosure in your customer is successful. Being self-disclosing is not successful unless it's super short. Likewise, mutuality is important, but even if your customer discloses a lot, that's not a reason to disclose a lot. So the agent says, have a great day, enjoy Australia, it's a great country. And the customer says, it sure is, we're moving there permanently. And the agent says, I lived there for 10 years in Melbourne, working in a travel agency. As you can imagine, it's a place with a lot of tourism. So, customer hung up. Customer does not want to know. The correct answer would be, tell me more, what are you moving there for? So once again, these are places where empathy is being interpreted as talking rather than listening. Another strategy that we found in human-human interaction was to refer to shared experience. So the agent says, earlier in the call, you mentioned that you were having a barbecue this weekend. Shall we look at the cost of overnight delivery? That's great. That got a really high customer care rating because that agent has referred back to something that they've shared earlier in the conversation. So this is a brief overview of some of the gaffes and the good places in this database of customer service messages. And the bottom line is empathy is not talking about yourself. Empathy is a process of listening, of building rapport, which is two-way, not one-way, over time. And that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this talk. So, how do you listen in a place where your only tool is language? Right? They're not nodding their heads because they can't be seen. So how do you do this paradoxical thing of listening in a context where language is your tool? Well, you remember these three things. You listen, you build rapport, and you do it over time. And my students and I have thought about this in terms of conversation having stages. This is actually an old finding from conversational analysis or ethnomethodology. So we introduce ourselves, we justify why we're there, we turn to the task. When we finish the task, we do a pre-closing, and then we close. These are the stages that have been found by Sachs and Shegloff in the article Opening Up Closing. So the customer says, I'd like to have it delivered. The agent says, no problem. So customer says, I'm glad we took care of that. That's basically it. So the agent doesn't push it. But the agent does say, glad you're satisfied. Can I help you with anything else? That's a pre-closing. It's a sign that what's coming next is a closing. The conversation can be opened back up, but it can be safely closed, and the customer closes it. No, this is great. So it allows the user to feel attended to, which is much better than the cut and paste option, is there anything else I can help you with, which doesn't allow a pre-closing. Glad you're satisfied, can I help you with anything else? The glad you're satisfied closes off that aspect of the conversation right after the problem is solved. So conversation has stages, and what's important about that is that conversation requires time. Conversation's not immediate. Conversation has strategies, and in the remainder, I seem to have inadvertently hidden some slides because you're not seeing some things I hope to show you. But what I'm showing you here is a concept that is an alternate to empathy, which is rapport. Rapport differs from empathy in that it is intrinsically dyadic. So empathy in this instantiation in conversational commerce is unidirectional. Rapport is bidirectional in the sense that I can't have rapport with you unless you have rapport with me. It's dyadic. It requires two people. I can't have rapport with a wall. I need to have rapport with something that's interacting with me at the same time. And everything we know from humans shows us that people build rapport using language and nonverbal behavior through a set of specific strategies that you can think of as, if you look at discourse, as discourse moves or conversational moves. They're things like praise, and I'm going to be talking in a little while about teenagers, and in our database, which is roughly 40 hours, I think, of conversation, we have 2 instances of praise. Turns out that teenagers do not praise one another very often. But praise is a strategy early in time that we use to build rapport. But over the course of time, we stop praising and we start violating social norms. So what we do is we set up an interaction with somebody else that fits social norms. So I've been working on this really hard because I've just moved to France, and although I've spent a lot of time in France before, I've never had a real job where I have to go in every day and I have to fill out paperwork and I have to do the kinds of things that you do in your everyday job. And I'm learning all kinds of ways that social norms are different. For example, I moved into an apartment, and I thought it would be nice, in my nice American way, to, and I think the Canadian norm might be a little bit closer to the French norm, but I'm interested to hear. So in my nice American way, I thought it would be appropriate to make a little basket of cookies and hang it from the doorknob of the other 3 apartments on my floor. Simple, right? With a little note saying, just moved into the floor. Some of you are laughing, so you must know that this is not appropriate. Luckily, before I did this, I asked my friend Nellie, who is French, who was the head of a computer science department in Paris before she retired. And so she both knows my cultural norms, and she knows the cultural norms of France. And she said, oh my God, no. Oh, you haven't done this yet, have you? And I said, no. She said, that is a terrible idea. How could it be a terrible idea? I'm making cookies and delivering them to neighbors. She said, that is incredibly intrusive. It's outside their door. It's hanging from their doorknob. Oh, just not okay. No, not at all. No, and she couldn't even explain it. It is just incredibly intrusive. So I have been trying hard to get my neighbors into my apartment where I can give them cookies. I've lived there now for 6 months, and only once has any of them set foot, like they'll set foot on my mat in front of my door and come no further. And luckily, one of my neighbors ran out of laundry soap, and so she stepped inside while I got the laundry soap. But I swear, she scooted out of there as fast as she possibly could. Her kids, though, for any of you who've studied language acquisition, we talk about a critical period. That is an age before which you have to learn something, otherwise it's much harder to learn. I think it's the same with culture, because the 2-year-old and the 4.5-year-old clearly don't have these cultural norms built in. So they're constantly, as soon as my door is open, flinging themselves inside the door, running for my bed, spread-eagling out on the bed, grabbing the cat, shaking the cat. My cat's puts up with all of this very well. And then the mother or father comes by, sees that they're in my apartment, and screams, "Get off her bed!" But I love these kids. I mean, they kind of act the way I do. So when we first meet somebody, we do our best to figure out what the social norms are. And we build rapport by adhering, to the extent possible, to those social norms. Little by little, over time, we mark the difference between our dyad and our interaction with other people in the world by reference to shared experience and by violations of social norms. So, Ali and I have known each other for a long time. This would probably be a little inappropriate because I haven't seen her for several decades. But suppose that we had regular interaction. I could not say to Daniel, "Daniel, doesn't really go together, the outfit." That wouldn't be appropriate. But I might be able to say, "Ali, well, let's just say, next time you might want to wear different shoes." And that's the kind of thing, I can't even see your shoes, so it's an example. But that violation of social norms, paradoxically, is a way of marking the exceptionalness of our interaction with another person. It shows that we are a dyad that has something that makes us more than two strangers. And by the way, you're going to be wrecked forever after this talk. If you ask nicely, I'll even give you hints about relationships, intimate relationships. But for the moment, you already know that as you work through a relationship, little by little, you begin to violate social norms. Now, there's a stellar paper, otherwise stellar paper, except that it got no positive results, didn't get the results they were expecting. It's a paper by Chuck Rich, Candy Seidner, and Tim Bickmore, who is a former PhD student of mine. And they were trying to build rapport between an agent and a person. And what they did was they had the agent use the conversation strategy that was appropriate for the next level of friendship. And it totally backfired. So you can't make a friend by going up to somebody and saying, "Orange is really not your color." That doesn't work. You kind of have to work up to it slowly. So that violation of social norms comes after praise over time, and this is why time's so important. We also self-disclose. I hate Tom Cruise. This comes from a movie recommendation system that we've been building. Negative self-disclosure is also really important. I don't see it on this list. We often do this as a way of doing what's called mitigating face threat. So rather than saying, you like Tom Cruise, which would be violation of social norms just by the tone of it, we'll say, our math agent, for example, says, I know, you're having trouble. Math is super hard. I hate it too. So that negative self-disclosure mitigates the threat of teaching somebody something. And we have a girl in our data set who says, "Do you have pets?" And the other girl says, "Yeah, I love them. What about you?" And the first kid says, "Well, I love them, but my mother won't let me have any because I kill them." We thought that was a bit TMI also. It kind of stopped the conversation right there. But it is an attempt at negative self-disclosure. So reference to shared experience, I recommended you Edge of Tomorrow last time, or, "Oh, do you remember when we went and had that stellar picnic in the park when the weather was so good?" Back channels, yep, question eliciting self-disclosure, so tell me more. And that's a great thing that an agent can do, is tell me more. And indirect delivery. So in a paper by Michael Medeo that was published in AI for Education, AI and Ed, he was able to show that in tutors, in human-human tutoring dyads, those that didn't yet have a relationship, the tutors that didn't yet have a relationship with their tutee, hedged or otherwise used indirect delivery as a way of softening a piece of advice. Okay, so we now know that conversation has stages, and we need to adhere to those stages because they indicate time. Conversation has strategies, and we need to pay particular attention to how these things change over time. So we build rapport, we violate social norms to fit the interlocutor's behavior expectations. It's wonderful working on this stuff. Ran Zhao, who's the PhD student who did a lot of the theory work on this, used to come into my office and say things like, "You know, you'd be a better advisor if you fit expectations." Thank you, I think. And he'd say, "Well, I just read about it today and I thought you'd want the hint." It's great. I really appreciate that. So fitting expectations is something that we do early on, and then we violate social norms. And Ran had a way of jumping ahead a little bit. And we follow these kinds of flowcharts over time. Now, interestingly, I'm not going to talk about this more, but you might wonder how we break rapport. And the work that we did, both reading the literature and looking at human-human conversation, we were able to find out that, interestingly, breaking rapport is engaging in exactly the same strategies, but at the wrong moment. So if I come home to my partner and I say, "Hi, how are you doing? Did you have a good day at work? Do you feel like you got a lot done? That's great. I thought I'd make dinner. What would you like for dinner?" At this point, your partner's really worried. And the reason is that you're using early in the relationship strategies in a relationship that's supposed to be far along. So we use exactly those same strategies at the wrong moment to break rapport. Okay, so let me show you an example of what we've done with agents, and then we'll kind of go back through this and look at how we build this stuff. So this is a conversational agent in a project that we did looking at the impact of dialect on learning. So in the US, there's a big debate about whether children should be allowed to speak the dialect they grew up speaking in the classroom. Few teachers believe that. Unfortunately, they believe that children need to speak the school English, mainstream American English. But that's not a dialect that's spoken by the entire culture. It's actually a dialect that's most representative of high socioeconomic status and education, and not of an area in the United States. And many kids come to school speaking another dialect, and they get dissed because they speak the dialect. They're told that they're speaking bad English. They're not speaking bad English, they're speaking good dialect. But it's hard to do research on this topic because you can't find a natural experiment where one group of kids is working with other children who speak their same dialect, and that same group of kids is working in another classroom with people who speak a different dialect. But you can do that with agents. So this is an agent who, this is a kid who's speaking with an agent. Oops.
I actually think it has to be low, because if it has to, because what do you think? Is it going to be higher or low?
Well, maybe we should make it lower so it has less room to wiggle around.
You took my idea, Alex. That was my idea because I...
Nuh-uh.
Yes, it was.
So you can see that there's a certain naturalness to this interaction. It's one of the reasons that I love working with kids. You can say, okay, today you're going to be working with a virtual child on your science experiment. And they're like, okay, whatever, you know. The impact, what we found in our results of this experiment, was that children who collaborated with an agent that spoke their own dialect during the brainstorming part of a science homework, and then said, oh, let's practice our presentation to the teacher. My teacher likes it when I speak my school English. Those children ended up using more science discourse. They made more gains in science than the children who worked with an agent that spoke school English all the way through. Now, of course, for parity, the school English only agent also said, oh, let's practice our presentation for the teacher. My teacher likes it when I speak my school English. But unexpectedly, what we found was that it wasn't really the dialect that was the causative factor that was predicting the learning. It was the rapport that the child felt with the agent. And they felt far greater rapport with the agent that spoke the way they did. So rapport is really having a very concrete impact on learning here. And it's not surprising, because we spend our time doing things with words and building rapport as we do it. And we spend our time walking through a world that increasingly has agents that are not human agents. And what we find is that people try and build rapport with them in the same way. So I've used the word rapport here, and what do I mean? I'm going to give it a very rough definition: a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. And I showed you the impact of an agent building rapport, or an agent building what we might call demographic rapport by speaking the same way the person did. But many other studies have found impacts of rapport on task performance. So students, survey respondents give higher quality answers if they feel rapport with an interviewer. Physicians who build rapport enroll more participants. They also get less visits to the hospital subsequently if they build rapport with their patients. Obviously, salespeople are always trying to build rapport with you to get you to buy something. And students learn better when they feel rapport with their peers. But this is kind of fuzzy. We did some structural equation modeling on the strategies that play a role in rapport. And we found that there's higher user satisfaction, higher intention to use a device, higher enjoyment in an interaction, higher trust, higher sense of intimacy, higher self-disclosure, and higher reciprocity in the presence of rapport-building strategies. And just quickly, why rapport and virtual assistants? Well, increasingly, we expect to live in a world where there's going to be these agents all around us. And if they just use task language, or, to my mind, even worse, if some use task language and the others are just dumb chatbots, I hope that's not hurting anybody's feelings, then it's not going to work. We change interaction styles over time, and that's why I keep indicating this importance of time. And for me, actually, the reason that I got interested in this was because I was interested in phenomena that were larger than a single human. That is, where the unit of analysis was a dyad or a group, and not a human, and the discipline that that imposes on our evaluations, and then things that take place over time. And we're going to interact with these things over time. And also, I never stop being interested in human behavior. I like building machines, but I'm also really fascinated with the way we act. And as in the experiment I just showed you, we can learn more about people than we sometimes can by looking at people-people interaction if we put an agent in place. Now, chatbots. Chatbots aim to build rapport but fail. And sometimes people insult me by saying, oh, this is a great chatbot. Why is that an insult? Because chatbots are usually built to keep chit-chat going. But that's not how we use rapport-building strategies as humans. We use rapport-building strategies that play a role in the task. So I don't say, nice weather we're having, how much do you earn? I say, your parents must be so proud of you. This was Tim Bickmore's thesis work. He followed a real estate agent around. She didn't say, so how much do you earn, and I'll tell you what kind of house you can buy. Doesn't happen that way. She said things like, your parents must be so proud of you. You're a professor at MIT. That's amazing. Now, sometimes parents wish their kids would go into industry, you know, because their earning power was higher. But you can probably reassure them about that. Do you feel like your salary at MIT is pretty good? She's just backed them into a corner where they have to tell her salary by using rapport-building strategies, not social chit-chat, but interpersonal, goal-oriented talk. And this seems to have appeared twice. Oh, 3 times. Okay. So the methodology that I've been showing you is that we look at human-human interaction. We theorize and model it so that we generalize it. So it's not just about 2 people that we saw in a room. We implement a system on the basis of the model. We implement that system. We design an evaluation. We evaluate it, and always we understand the ways in which we really screwed up and didn't observe something. There's more to be done. And then we go back to the natural human-human data. So let me move back a little bit and tell you a little bit about some examples where that's been the case. Over years and years, we've looked at virtually every kind of interaction you can think of. We've looked at kids playing with other kids. We've looked at graduate students talking about their thesis projects. We've looked a lot at direction giving. We've looked, in the middle is Diane, the real estate agent. We offered people a chance to be evaluated for their ability to buy a home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so it is real people who really want to buy houses who are coming in to see her, and so on and so forth. And you can see Seymour Papert in the bottom and the center, in case that warms your heart. I'm going to show you the very briefest of snippets. Actually, I'm going to show you 2 snippets to show you the kind of data we collect. And I'm going to ask you to simply raise your left hand if you think the first interaction has more rapport-building strategies. No, actually, let me change that. I'm going to ask you to raise your left hand if you think the first dyad shows more rapport, and your right hand if you think the second dyad shows more rapport. You got that? Okay, here's the first dyad.
As part of our math program, we do the keystones just before high school, so nice. We don't have to deal with it then.
These are 2 kids who are waiting for us to prepare the paperwork for them to tutor each other in linear algebra.
Factoring polynomials is really the only thing that I've lost after that time. Yeah. And overall, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, it makes sense to me, but it doesn't seem like you would use it that much, as opposed to geometry and algebra, where a lot more common. But factoring polynomials, that's all like stuff that doesn't really tangible.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't really need to see a lot of that. Here's the second one.
Like 1 minute, it's like the easiest thing ever, like those graphs, and then like
just like small multiplication, division stuff.
yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like
Letters.
letters, variables, you know.
Yeah, and I don't really understand most of it.
I mean, I understand this stuff, which is on my paper right now. I mean, I get that, but there's just like this weird transition in like the middle of algebra, like from algebra half to algebra 1, that is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes it's really stressful for me, you know.
Like, don't like math.
Okay, so I've taught you a bunch of strategies to look for, and you've now seen them at play in 2 dyads. Left hand up if the first dyad had more rapport, right hand up if the second dyad had more rapport. Wow, you are a remarkably consistent audience. And just very briefly, what makes you say that? What makes you say that this second dyad has more rapport? Can you use the strategy terms that you just saw? Self-disclosure. Self-disclosure, great. Yep, on both parts. Yep. Shared experience. Which example are you thinking of? That's a great one. Yeah.
Like you said something about, I tried those
Yeah. Good. Good. What else? Anything else? One more. There's some mutuality in there. Hate math, hate math. I don't actually know whether I believe that the kid on your left hates math. We have a great example where these 2 kids are trying to find a common subject of interest. And one of them says, yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a chef. And the other one says, yeah, me too. I have no belief whatsoever that that second kid wants to be a chef, but mutuality is really important. Good. So these are the kinds of dialogues that we looked at. We also actually looked at not just linear algebra, we looked at groups. We've started to become more interested in groups, and we looked at the social antecedents of curiosity. We analyze these things at super fine levels of detail. We look at the prosody, we look at the hand gestures, the eye movements, the eyebrow movements, the head movements, torso, and the kinds of strategies that they utter. We pick out high utility sequences that predict the item of interest. And in case you are wondering, and I hope one of you would have asked this question if I didn't say it now, how do we know there's rapport between the 2 of them? So what we do is we use a technique from social psychology called thin slice annotation, developed by Nalini Ambady and Bob Rosenthal, where we ask naive raters to look at 30-second slices of our videos out of order. So they're not looking at a delta in rapport, they're looking at the rapport every 30 seconds. We have 5 of them do that. We do an interclass correlation to come up with a common rating amongst the 5 people, and that's the rating for every 30 seconds, and then we reassemble those 30-second slices. We also look at what's going on over time. We use TTARL, which is a lovely algorithm that allows you to predict an outcome event on the basis of income events. So here we're looking at the fact that when one kid insults the other and both of them smile, then the level of rapport is higher. If one kid insults the other one and the second one doesn't smile, the rapport tends to be low. So these are the kinds of things that we can look at, and what's nice is we can look at that cross-modally. And then we build models of rapport building based on these kinds of strategies. And we build social science style models such as this one, but we also build the kinds of models that we can build into machine learning algorithms. And once again, essential to this is the notion that this is dyadic. It's multi-level. That is, we're looking at behaviors and inferring underlying psychological states. We're not confusing mutuality. We can infer mutuality from the fact that two people say the same thing, but we're not confusing that with something that we can see. And then we implement those systems in novel architectures. And here the red part is the novel modules that we are super proud of. One automatically evaluates rapport between the two agents, the human agent and the computer agent, by looking at their last turns, both for the human agent and the computer agent, looking at their prosody for both of them, looking at their nonverbal behavior for both of them, looking at the strategies for both of them, and assessing a level of rapport from 1 to 7. And it does that every 30 seconds. Input into that is from a set of parallel conversational strategy classifiers. So we're able to pretty consistently, with high reliability, evaluate the conversational strategy used by the person. And then on the basis of these two things, we reason not just what the next task move is. So if you're recommending a movie, what movie should you recommend? But also, what strategy, what conversational strategy should you use to raise rapport, maintain rapport, or destroy rapport, but we never really make it destroy rapport. So let me show you a system or two that uses this. Now, the system I showed you first with the little girl talking about the bridge that she's building, where the agent says, "Nuh-uh," that's a Wizard of Oz system. There is no speech recognition system that will recognize the speech of children that age, and certainly not children that age speaking African American vernacular English. But this next system is a working system. And this is, once again, a tutoring in linear algebra, and it's based on the findings of the data I showed you. This is the first. You're going to see two snippets. The first part where they've just been introduced to one another, and then the second part where they're tutoring.
What's your name?
I'm Sasha.
It's nice to meet you.
You as well.
So what school do you go to?
I go to Ellis.
Oh, cool, I go to Pa Cyber School.
There's really bad jokes throughout this.
Oh,
What grades are you in?
I'm in 7th.
Cool, me too. What do you do for fun?
I like to draw. What about you?
I like playing robot soccer.
Okay, so once again, you tell a kid, she happens to be 15, you're going to be working with a virtual peer to get tutored in linear algebra. Fine, whatever. But this is a girl who has a lot of trouble with algebra. And you can see she looks a little hesitant at the beginning, and then she starts smiling because this is this bizarre virtual peer. This is the part where they turn to working on the problems. And you can see from the look on her face, she is not excited about this. And in fact, she doesn't do well in this subject. But watch what happens.
Nope, that's not quite right. Don't worry, I think these are hard too.
Okay. Plus 9. Oh, 50.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
So what do you think you should do next?
I will divide by 10, and that'll get me x equals 5.
Correct, I'm such a good teacher. Okay, let's go to the next one. I'm having a lot of fun working with you.
Me too.
So you can see there's a distinct change in her behavior over the course of this. And you can name each of the strategies that she used, that the agent used, to do that. And we can talk about gender and ethnicity afterwards if you're interested. But what you're seeing here is, and I'm going to kind of back out of this talk at this point, what you're seeing here is that we're implementing, for those of you who are interested in dialogue system, we're implementing socially aware dialogue management. We have a dialogue history that's maintaining a history of what was said the intention of the speaker, the responsibility of the system, how it achieved that responsibility, but also the level of rapport and how that rapport is being built. So at every step, we're determining what to say and how to say it. And we're not working at the utterance level yet, although we hope to one day. We're not automatically generating every single word. That's a problem that a lot of people in dialogue systems are working on, and we're not yet able to do that. But we are working at the level of the intention. Now, just to make sure you know that this is not all rosy, this is super hard, and there's lots of places where we have to hack it for the moment, and over the years we hope to remove the hacks one by one. That's my general philosophy of life. And here, the issue that we face, you know, I should never borrow slides from someone else's talk. I hate it when these things do this. Okay, let's just make this all happen now, okay? And then, seriously. Okay, so social talk is super important. And from now on, as you go through the world, you're going to see this everywhere. But there's not a lot of it. And so the data that we're working on is small data, not large data. And so although we had all of these dyads of kids interacting with one another, we don't have enough to build the kinds of algorithms that most people are building for dialogue systems. Some of the ways that we're dealing with this are, so Steve Young, who's at Cambridge University and also at Apple, developed a system, not for this, but he developed a way of building simulated users. Have any of you used this? It's a way of replicating data. So basically you take the data from one person, and then you replicate it in such a way as to get more data to work on. We've been doing that, and it's been very successful. In fact, that's what we use to build a recommendation system, and we just published that in I can't remember the name of the conference, but it got a Best Paper award because what we found was that the rapport building movie agent incited higher confidence in the recommendation. So it's not just social chit-chat. There's no reason to do this unless, in my mind, unless it improves performance. I don't do this so that you want to spend more time with it. I do it to make the performance better, and I think that's important. People find it more useful. They feel more transparent. They feel more transparency in the system's goals. They feel that the agent is more interested in them and that the agent is more attentive to them. Now, you might wonder about evaluation. And for anybody who builds dialogue systems, end-to-end dialogue systems, you know that pipeline systems like this are a total bear to evaluate because there are so many different things happening in each of the modules. There's software engineering that you need to evaluate. There's the things that you're actually interested in. There are the things you're not in the slightest interested in. Like if someone would just solve automatic speech recognition for me, I would buy it. But they haven't. But there are lots of ways of evaluating. And so we don't give up and say, well, people like it. We look at total time of speaking. We look at the system speaking time versus the user speaking time. The response time. We discovered that for another system, in another paper that we published, that when the system's response is faster, the people believe the recommendation more. So responsiveness plays a role. We look at the conversational strategies, of course. We look at what commerce people call the conversion rate. That is, how often do people actually go to the movie that they were recommended? And we did that in a kind of a fun way. I don't think I'm going to have time to show you this. Should I stop like right around now? Yeah, okay. I'm not going to show you this, so I'll just tell you. We were lucky enough to be invited to the World Economic Forum in Davos. We were the very first piece of interactive technology in the hall, in the great hall of Davos. And so we had all these presidents and kings and other world leaders come through and use the system, around 300 of them. And what we built was a system that could give them recommendations of people to meet who were at the same level that they were, because it's very important to them to feel that they're not meeting underlings, but other people at their same very high level. And we gave them recommendations of talks to go see. And then we followed up. So we sent them messages saying, this is someone you might meet, and we could track whether they sent a message to that other person through the system. So that's our kind of conversion rate. How often did they accept the session recommendation? How often did they accept the person recommendation? And then very important is this thin slice annotation, mutual attentiveness, such as eye gaze, coordination, convergence in their language. Did they begin to speak like one another, and so forth. So I'm going to stop here by saying, I really argue always in everything I do for us to look at people when we build people-facing systems, but really look at people, not stand in a mall with a pad and jot down the occasional note, but collect as much data as you possibly can and analyze it at the smallest granularity that you possibly can, and then reassemble it into models. Don't go directly from your observation to your system, but build a generalized model that gives you a theory of how the phenomenon that you're interested in happens, because that gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more rigor, but also nimbleness. And if you're going to build systems that interact with people, don't go for knee-jerk aspects like personality, which is really tough to do well and is really frequently done badly in our world. Build something where we have a theory of how it happens and where we can track it. Take time into account. Remember that you spend more of your life with your cell phone than you do with your partner. And so take that into account when you're looking at how an interaction should change over time. Every morning, Siri should not say to you, "Hi, I'm Siri. I can help you find things to do." Well, no shit, Siri. Oops, I should have covered the microphone. You did this yesterday and you did it the day before. Why are you reintroducing yourself? And specifically about rapport, make sure that you don't talk at people. This is, and Ali knows this, this is a lesson that I've been trying to teach ever since I built narrative systems. In the early 90s, Disney was building a lot of systems to tell stories to children. But I believe children have a lot more stories to tell than Disney does, and their stories are usually better. So try and build systems that listen more than, or at least as much as they talk, because making people feel heard is the heart of customer service, and I think it's the heart of any interaction between technology and its users. Thanks.
How much of this translates across cultures? Because I think this is great work and it's amazing, but I think that in many cultures, you're going to have to build these models from scratch.
So yes, it's a great question. And I'll give you a great example. I gave a talk in Japan, and I showed those two clips. And I said, which one has more rapport? And the younger people gave the same answer you did. And the older people gave the opposite answer. They said the first one showed more rapport. And no one's ever said the first one showed rapport. I was really surprised. And this older woman raised her hand and she said, there was so much respect for one another in that first dialogue. They really allowed one another to speak and showed that they were attending. So yes, there are differences. However, what we've found over the years that we've been doing this, these kinds of models, is that the surface level behaviors are identical and the goals are identical. What differs is the mapping. So we built a system called Beat, which is a system for animators. It automatically attributes nonverbal behavior and prosody to a text. And it's got a place for a culture module that mediates between the surface level behaviors, like eye gaze, and the intention, like mutuality. So for example, in Japan, again, it's inappropriate to look somebody in the eyes as much as we do. But mutuality is very important, and eye gaze is very important. And if you keep that in mind, I'm currently working with a group in Korea to do something similar, to take these surface level behaviors. And I didn't give you this as a speech that I give to my students all the time. Remember the difference between observation and interpretation. What you want to do when you analyze is observe what's going on and then interpret it through looking at data. If you can keep those separate, you can build systems that are culture specific.
Hi, thank you for the talk today. It was really insightful. So quick question. Do we have any insight in how these kind of behaviors and responses are developing humans at an early age for a child, and essentially how these social norms are developed? And can we use those insights in training a reinforcement learning model?
That is so great that you said that. You have to give me your card afterwards. Okay, so I have a colleague at PRAIRIE in Paris who builds algorithms that model babies' speech recognition, and he uses them as unsupervised algorithms for speech recognition. He spends half his time at Facebook and half his time at PRAIRIE. And he and I are both, I mean, we were both trained as cognitive scientists, and we're working as computer scientists, so we're interested in this bidirectional, you know, where both win. And that's the project that we're looking at is, can we look at what I call the envelope of language? So you may know, so Colin Trevarthen in the 60s, a researcher, psychologist in Edinburgh, did a bunch of videos of mother-infant interaction. And if you look at them, they're amazing, because the baby goes, bleh, and the mother says, exactly. And the baby says, bah, and the mother says, right, that's exactly what I was saying. And the baby goes, nah. And you can see over the course of these, the baby getting the prosody, even though this child doesn't have what's underneath that curve, what's underneath that fundamental frequency. So the question that we're going to ask is, can we use the baby's acquisition of the conversational envelope to build similar kinds of algorithms for bots? I probably shouldn't have said that. I probably should have said, no, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That wouldn't be helpful at all. But I'm really excited about this project, and if it's something that you know something about or that you want to participate in, let me know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation. Just at the very end of your talk, you hinted at the Davos example, where one of the requirements was the who is speaking. And so it was sort of given that, is the rapport, is there an expectation that both agents are of a sort of equal status? Because that, I think, a great deal of linguistics deals with the who is speaking and sort of what is conveyed isn't just the content, but sort of implications. There's certainly certain lines of linguistics. And so is maximum rapport, is there an expectation of a peer-to-peer rather than a sort of hierarchy?
Maximum rapport does not rely on mutuality of status.
Okay.
However, maximum rapport relies on an acknowledgement of status. And this work has gone...
Is that a limitation? Is that something that is potentially problematic, where like a little bit of the who, and if it's a virtual agent, how do you...
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so we did not build kings or presidents. We built a virtual assistant. That's Sarah, the socially aware robot assistant. It's, by the way, the first time in my life I've ever, no, that's not true, the robot, the real estate agent was female. But this is the second time in my life I've ever built a gendered agent. All of the other agents I build are gender ambiguous and ethnicity ambiguous, because I want people to be able to attribute whatever they wish and I don't want to fall into noxious stereotypes of ethnicity and gender. But Davos asked for a woman. They said not too sexy, professional looking. I mean, they were very clear about what they wanted. And she spoke like an assistant. That is, she built rapport, but she didn't say things like, we presidents, we know how tough it is to meet people like us. Presidents do that. There's been a lot of work in discourse analysis and in sociolinguistics on the role played by power and solidarity. Actually, there's beautiful work on T versus V pronouns. So in French, tu and vous are ways both of marking power. So if I use tu to you and you use vous to me, that's a difference in power. But if we use tu to one another and we've never met, that's an indication of solidarity.
Yeah. No, and
So-
the previous question about culture, I thought the specifics may differ from culture to culture, but that those little micro hierarchies, I think, seem relevant. Or just, again, with the kids, it seemed like those agents were possibly, they weren't teachers, they were younger people. And again, it seemed important that they, again, I go to this school, you go to that school. So it was.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me step back.
I'll step away.
Yeah, no. It's a good question. It's an excellent question. In the vast majority of my work, once again, in everything but the real estate agent and Sarah, I build peers and not power relationships. I don't like the way in which computers often represent themselves as experts or more powerful than their users. And that's a kind of a political commitment. But I'm also much more interested in collaborative relationships between people and machines, cooperative relationships between people and machines, and not powered relationships between people and machines, for various reasons that you can imagine. If I were to build a system, and when I did build a system where there was a power relationship, we looked at the kinds of ways in which people indicate their respective positions. But we also knew from the literature and from our own looking at the data that people build rapport across power. So we build rapport with people who are lower on some kind of, any one of the number of hierarchies that exist, and with people who are higher than on any one of the hierarchies that exist. And we actually know that those rapport building strategies work. For example, when people adapt their speech rate to an interviewer, they're more likely to get the job. It's the interviewee who adapts the speech rate and not the interviewer. So it's a convergence, not a co-convergence.
Yeah, it's all those kinds of complications that, yeah.
I don't think they're, well, for me, they're not complications, they're
But
fabulous.
they're essential to communication, my understanding.
Absolutely,
Thank
yeah.
you.